Welcome to another Office Talk. How you doing, Trevor?
It's our second one for the year.
Second one.
And it's great because we have it planned on the calendar every third Monday or whatever.
So for those who don't know you, what is your name?
My name's Trevor Puskar. I'm the broker or market president for Berkshire Hathaway, HomeServices, Florida Properties Group in Lakeland.
And I'm Brandon Moore Johnson. I am a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices.
And for those of us who can't see the angle we're looking on, we have Randy Fox, our executive producer, sitting back there. That's right.
So what's on topic of conversation for today?
I would like to talk a little bit about, because it came up in our office last week, and I don't think enough agents are vigilant of wire fraud.
Yeah.
And the scams that are going around. It's not the most sexiest or fun topic, but it's out there. It's prevalent. Our company has taken great steps, like switching email servers so it's more secure.
Right.
And we're already finding out that it's working. So it's something that most agents, it's like it hasn't happened to me, or I don't know anybody happened. So I'm just going to conduct business the way it's been conducted. And that's about the most thought that they put into it.
Right.
We have a really good agent in our office, Chuck Hoffman, and he had a closing last week, and we looked. He had it was a fake email address, so they didn't. Our IT department looked. They didn't get into his email, so they created an email address that said @BHHSFILPG, and at quick glance, it looked like it came from Chuck. Chuck, fortunately, comes to the trainings, comes to the meetings, and he is on top of it. So I appreciate that. He told his customers, wiring instructions will never come from my email address. If it does, it's a scam. And the customer, of course, and then he called Chuck because Chuck wasn't responding to the emails and wanted to know what's up. Called Chuck, verified, and somebody was trying to look like Chuck's email, and thank goodness none of the money was transferred. So they called the next morning, and I think it was on Martin Luther King Day, so banks were closed, so you really couldn't call and verify. But I mean, I just can't say enough good things that Chuck educated his customers that it would be a scam.
So how much money would have been lost?
$130 some odd $1,000.
That's crazy.
So I always tell the agents, sometimes it seems like a pain, the security parameters that we put in place and our best practices. We always want to be helpful. Title company will send it to the agent will send it to the customer or whatever. We don't need to be any part of the wiring instructions delivery. So, and sometimes it can be a pain because, hey, we want to get to closing quick, or the customer trusts you and they don't really know the title company, or sometimes we have different title companies from different sellers that might be out of state, whatever it is. So I say you can have two points of being uncomfortable, telling your customer that they have to get it directly from the title company, or sorry, they hacked my email and now you lost $137,000. So you can choose, right?
I think that's a really good point. From what I've experienced in the 5 years that I have, people don't realize how serious the transactions are. People think, oh, we just sell a house and it's all fun and dandy. But the actual legal ramifications, the fraud that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right. People, I think real estate agents and just the general public don't understand how serious it is to make sure that we're checking for fraud, to make sure that we're looking at all the little details of the contract. Because I've seen people lose either so much money or they lose out on the house, all because of small little details not being looked at. So it's just word of advice for the general public is serious. Buying and selling real estate is a very serious transaction, and it can be fun and it's really great because it's one of your greatest assets. But you got to look at the fine details. You got to be very specific with what you're doing.
And these are wire transfers, so it's not like somebody hacked into your credit card and you call the bank and say, hey, that was fraudulent, and you get it back. Once it's out, it's out. There's very little that a bank can do if you don't catch it on time to get that money back. It is so bad that the FBI won't even look at it unless it's $1 million and up. So it is huge. And I think the agents, especially in Central Florida, are a little bit numb to it, because when you read the articles, it's always like, say, out of Tampa, Orlando, Miami, or whatever, because that's just where the news hubs are. But it is happening in our in our own backyard. Fortunately, it hasn't happened. We haven't had any customers in the Lakeland office been damaged by it. But if they're trying to get through one of our agents' emails, they're trying to get through all of them, and then fake sellers as well. So Melissa had one, and they were trying to sell a lot. One of our customers wanted to buy a lot, and the only way they found out is one of the neighbors said, "Hey, I heard you were selling your lot," and it was on Zillow, and it was listed through a brokerage out of the area. They never verified for the seller, so it does happen locally. I hate to see it, because it's one of those things. It can be very easily prevented with a couple checks and balances,
Right.
And it needs to be standard of practice across the board, because we see it. Fortunately for us, we have our title company has, I don't know, 3 or 4. We have a lot of cyber fraud, cybersecurity insurance, things for those stop gaps in place if that were to happen, so we could still move to closing. But there's a lot of, I've heard, like out of Orlando and some other like local or smaller title companies, if they wired it out, they're done. They don't have the extra hundreds of thousands of dollars to bridge that gap, to get to closing and then figure it out on the back end through insurance and stuff like that. Because the insurance company doesn't say, okay, well, here you go, here's your money. It's insurance, so it takes weeks, months, whatever. They have to do investigations. So just know that it happens. It scares me to death. It's not getting any better. Dewey, our owner, one of our owners of the company, was at a conference, and there are countries with departments that they test the aptitude of kids to see how well they're at hacking, just to hack American financial systems. So it's not going to get any better. And the best way to prevent it is just to have good systems and processes in place.
In education.
Yeah. So
Got to know what's going on. So speaking of knowing what's going on, what else is prevalent right now in the market?
Prevalent as, tell me a little bit.
Just things that are top of mind that you've been processing. I know the wire fraud has been a big one, but what else has been, as we're going into and starting 2024, what's been kind of the top 2 things that you're also focusing on?
Well, on a more positive note, and we spoke about this, our last one, is we're in somewhat of a real estate shift, and nobody really knows if it's going to be a bull or a bear or whatever. But we're seeing some shifts in the market. So making our agents focusing on having a good, solid business practices so they can gain market share. And it shows, our numbers show that we're doing great. So to get through whatever that shift is, plan for the worst, expect for the best, and we'll all be much better for it. So that is positive for our office, specifically in our company. So I'm excited about that.
Sweet.
What are you seeing on the agent end?
Same thing on the agent end right now. We're seeing a lot of shifts in the market. When I talk to being at the Florida Midwinter meeting, every conversation that we've been having is, one, the looming litigations that are going on, how that might affect us, what's going and how that might change the industry. But 2, what the buyer activity is. We're seeing a lot of uptick in buyer activity. Mortgage applications are increasing. We're still at a low inventory, but from what everybody's been saying for the last year and a half, as soon as interest rates start coming down, buyers are going to start coming back into the market.
Right.
So what I'm personally seeing is a shift between sellers' realistic expectation of the market, and it's not so realistic right now.
Right.
They still want to get the highest and best for a home that's not like top of, that's not the best in the market. And then also on the buyer side, buyers are realizing, oh, great, I don't have to get an 8% mortgage. I can get a 6.5% mortgage. I feel like it's a discount. I can start affording things. So they're starting to enter back into the market. Yeah. So we're seeing kind of a struggle between the two of asking for closing costs, sellers not wanting to give it, buyers getting it. So if buyers are persistent, it's a really great time to buy. But right now that like dynamic is still kind of a tough point.
It's heating up. I think a lot of the sellers are looking back in COVID whenever it was hot. So that was more, I think, driven, at least in Florida, of, hey, Florida's open. I want my kids to be in school, business. You know, I want to be somewhere where I can live and provide for my family. So we don't have that pressure from buyers now. So I think back then it didn't matter what the rates were. You were going to get, I mean, heck, it was crazy. You'd have a 800 credit score buyer, 20% down. I mean, what you would historically consider a plus premium buyer, and then you'd have to go back and say, well, you know, they just got beat out by 10 other cash offers that were $100,000 with no contingency. So I don't think we're going to get back to that, but we will. I think if it's affordable, we'll see multiple offer situations, and I think you'll see a lot more negotiations, specifically after the contract inspections and things like that.
I will say in the multifamily space, duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes, those are very much all multiple offer situations.
Right.
So in your regular residential, it's how the market's shifting, but people aren't seeing. I have buyers looking for duplexes right now, and we submitted an offer, and it was still 6 offers.
Yeah.
Seller's not accepting, any sort of concessions or anything like that. So it all depends on, the market that you're in and the product that you're going for.
The prices on those things are crazy. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How much for?
There's still cash buyers in it.
You can almost buy 2 separate houses for that much. But I mean, that's good for multifamily people. So, or multifamily sellers, they've held on to them forever, and they can offload them and move on and reinvest the money somewhere else.
They have a product that people want, especially in our market. There's not a lot of inventory for that.
There's not a ton.
So when it comes up, it's gone pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it'd almost be cheaper to build them than buy them right now.
To some extent, yeah.
You know, if you had your own crew and your own construction company to build them.
Therein lies the question, your own crew.
Right. Right. So, anything else you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I just got back from the Florida Midwinter meeting, so my mind is just swimming with all of the things. So I want to do a little more in-depth kind of conversation on that at some point. But right now, the top of thing that's going to be top of mind for a lot of the realtors going into 2025 is a dues increase just got added.
Okay.
So Florida Realtors is going to be doing a $30 dues increase starting in 2025. And that is going towards making sure that we still have the technology to make sure our members are being benefited. So forewarned being the biggest thing.
Yeah.
We haven't had a dues increase since 2010.
Right.
So there are things like, oh, they're just taking more money from us again. I'm like, yeah, it feels like that. But for cost of business, inflation, we're still at 4% inflation. Sure. So it's just the cost of business on that move. But then also with the looming litigations that we have going on, the Florida Realtors, what I like is they're preparing themselves to be able to, because they're in a class action lawsuit currently.
Right.
So they already hired on people who specialize in antitrust, who are based out of New York. And then they brought on somebody who's from Miami, he's one of 6 lawyers who are actually certified antitrust. There's only 6 out of, it's like 11,000 lawyers who have that specific certification. So we hired him on. He's looking at the whole case. From what he's seeing on that front, he's like, it's a baseless, from what we all have known, like it's a baseless thing. He's like, but we still have to fight it. Right. And it's still gonna be very expensive.
Right. If I've ever involved in litigation, it was always frivolous.
Yeah.
We had one time, and the mediator said, we're still wondering what you guys are doing here today. I'm like, us too. So
those dues increase are going towards making sure we're protected on that front, and we're not going to be at a loss later on. It's not going to be detrimental to our membership.
Right.
And then one of the things that I found interesting that he talked about, just like on a side note, is that what happened in Missouri for that case, he's like, it actually holds no bounds for us being forced into any decision from the Missouri one,
because it's only in that circuit.
It's only in that certain state. So like that's where you get all these copycat lawsuits. Right. But one of the interesting things that he said is the judge there found it to be so egregious that he actually didn't allow the NAR or the state association to provide any evidence to support their basis. Yeah. It's like, so the difference between the lawsuit here in Florida is like, we'll actually be allowed to provide supportive evidence as to why these decisions are being made, which, if you're not following super closely, all you hear is
you just see the headlines.
And then when you really look into it, it's like, oh, there's reasons why things happened the way they did. And we weren't actually allowed to present any evidence for why we
hard to win something if you can't provide any evidence. Well, mean, that's pretty much all I have today. I don't want to talk everybody's ear off, but